Okay, guys, we're back. Let's get finished here. This is really important.
Yeah, and we're all. Nobody's on.
That's all right. They'll be back.
Yeah, they'll come back on.
They'll come back. You just keep going. They'll be back. All right, keep going.
As Adonai, your God, lives, was her first statement. Then after she talked about her and her son's lack, her last statement was verse 15. After, or 12 is, after we have eaten that, we will die, is what she said.
Yep.
We believe Eliyahu eyes were open then because he states, verse 13.
Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go and do what you said. But first, use a little of it to make me a small loaf of bread and bring it out to me. After that, make food for yourself and your son."
Sorry, folks. The statement in verse 13, don't be afraid. The next part is interesting and godly. Go do what you said, but first show Adonai that you accept his call. In other words, he was telling this lady, this woman, this widow, go do what you said.
Hey guys, thanks for coming back.
Now think about that statement. What did she have to lose? A small loaf of bread to feed that stranger?
Yeah.
She already recognized him as being a prophet, or at the very least, a preacher. Her statement was, I gotta find it.
Is Adonai your God lives? Is that the statement you're looking for?
Is Adonai your
yeah,
God
verse
lives?
12.
Then this man of God says, verse 14.
For this is what Adonai, the God of Israel, says. The pot of meal will not get used up, nor will there fail to be oil in the jug until the day Adonai sends rain down on the land. You just said 14, right?
Yeah. Was she thinking, okay, if this works, we will not die? Well, in all reality, Adonai kept his word.
Mm-hmm.
Now read 15 and 16.
Okay. She went and acted according to what Elijah had said, and she, her, and her household had food to eat for a long time. The pot of meal did not get used up, nor did there fail to be oil in the jug, in fulfillment of the word of Adonai spoken through Elijah.
In other words, what she just read was, it worked. Then a seemingly disaster strikes. 17 and 18.
A while later, the son of the woman whose house it was fell ill. His illness grew increasingly serious until his breathing stopped. He said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, you man of God? Did you come to me just to remind me how sinful I am by killing my son?"
The widow woman's son dies. She gets confused and starts pulling at straws. About like most people today would do, don't you think? Is your God trying to show me how sinful I am by killing my boy? That was her question to
What's that?
the guy who just fed him with just a drop of oil and a little bit of flour to make them so they could survive. 19 and 20.
19 and 20. "Give me your son," he said to her. Taking him from her lap, he carried him into the room upstairs where he was staying and laid him on his own bed. Then he cried out to Adonai, Adonai, my God, have you brought also this misery on this widow I am staying with by killing her son?
Now, how many have actually stopped and thought about that one little statement? Here's what it says. It seems this man of God, Eliyahu or Elijah, had the same questions for Adonai as this woman did.
Yeah, never saw that before.
Now we have heard and read that what Eliyahu did with the dead boy's body, with every explanation known to man as their analogy of why. Think about this. In verse 20, Eliyahu is actually saying, did you, Adonai, kill her son? He did what a lot of people do. Blame God for the child, husband, wife, or friend's death. We have heard that a lot in our days. But it always happened, but it also happened back then, even by what? Even by the man of God.
Mm-hmm.
The one who never saw death. Okay, verse 21.
He stretched himself out on the child 3 times and cried out to Adonai, Adonai, my God, please let this child's soul come back into him.
Now this is more interesting than what it was when I first read it the first 3 times. Here's what I wrote. Now that is so interesting. Eliyahu or Elijah laid on top of the dead boy and cried out to Adonai, my God, let this child's soul or life come back to him. He gets up, looks around, nothing. You ever thought about that? So he climbed back on top of the dead boy and states, Adonai, my God, let the child's soul or life be restored to him. He gets up again, looks around, waits, nothing. And the reason I state those is because it says he laid on top of him 3 times. So then what I wrote, so he climbed back on top of the boy, on top of the dead boy's body, and says, now listen, she just read it, Adonai, my God, please let this child's soul or life come back into him. Please. The 3rd time. Verse 22.
Adonai heard Elijah's cry. The child's soul came back into him, and he revived.
The boy came back to life. Adonai heard Eliyahu's cry, and he was revived. Now really, stop and think about this. What would a lot of those church people be saying? What kind of a cult would Eliyahu been considered to be in? In this day and age, that doesn't happen. Nobody is brought back to life after maybe an hour or so of death. I can hear the good church people from this day and age. He wasn't really dead. He must have passed out, maybe from something he ate. Or maybe he was sick and had a high fever. And the fever broke, just as Eliyahu laid on top of him the 3rd time. They're trying to humanize God. To us, the most interesting statement is in verse 24. Read 24, sweetie.
The woman replied to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of Adonai that you speak is the truth."
That was interesting. All the time Eliyahu was with this widow and her son, the flour and oil never ran out, although she only had so little to make one small loaf of bread to eat and die. She says, "Now I know you are a man of God." What happened to all that other stuff? What about the never-ending promise of bread for the family? And now, what happened with you, or with your son? Now you say, and that the word of Adonai that you speak is truth. Wasn't it truth when the bread and water or bread and oil didn't run out?
I would think so.
But it changed her attitude because he prayed for the boy, her son. She got a different point of view. Now I wrote, it didn't take a ton of bricks to fall on her. No, it only took a never-ending supply of food, a son brought back to life, for her to admit the word of Adonai that you speak is truth. That's quite a bit.
That is quite a bit.
People, would you say not all that much has changed? We are provided with, we are provided for a whole life. But after whatever you classify a tragedy, you start blaming everybody else, even Adonai, the Lord God. It must be his fault. It couldn't be the way you raised that child, not to respect authority, not even your authority, disrespect the teacher, the schools, the police, and that other race. Don't start pointing fingers. You disrespect the race you're not in. It doesn't matter what race. Something may have happened 100, 200, 300 years ago, but because it's you, like that woman, you blame others, even Adonai. The last 10 words of verse 24 tell a lot.
The word of Adonai that you speak is the truth.
Can you hear that? The word of Adonai that you speak is the truth. The light bulb went off. The light bulb came on. That was what we all should be looking for. Even wanting from the pulpits that you sit in front of. From the church doctrine, denominational philosophy, the truth about Adonai and his son, Yeshua. You should want only truth. By the writing in chapter 18:1, read that please, 18:1.
A long time passed. Then in the 3rd year, the word of Adonai came to Elijah. Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain down on the land.
Okay. You might say that was a very long time to go without rain. And also indicate how long approximately Eliyahu spent with the woman and her son, and how long she was supplied with food. About 3 years. And then she says that about her son? Well, the flour and oil didn't run out for that long. No. No wonder she didn't see the truth before. It took a miracle with her son. Then Adonai came to Eliyahu and says, "Go present yourself to the king Ahab. You know, the one who has been trying to find you to kill you. Go to him." You think Eliyahu went, "Are you sure?"
You sure that's what you want me to do? Tom had a comment that maybe they should all hear concerning what you're talking about.
Okay.
He said, "You seem to have a theme in the past couple weeks. God seems to have to prove himself so a lot of people, for people to believe."
Over and over and over and
Good point,
over.
Tom.
You're finally getting to the point. Yes, that is true, Tom. Verses 2 through 6, chapter 18, please.
When Elijah went to present himself to Ahab, the famine in Shamron had become severe. Ahab called Obadiah, who was in charge of the palace. Now Obadiah greatly revered Adonai. You said 2 and 3?
2 through 6.
Okay. For example, when Izevel, Izevel,
Yeah.
was murdering Adonai's prophets, Obadiah took 100 prophets.
Oh, that's Jezebel.
Oh, sorry, Jezebel. When Jezebel was murdering Adonai's prophets, Obadiah took 100 prophets, hid them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go throughout the land and check all the springs and valleys maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can find grass somewhere so we can keep our horses and mules alive and not lose all the animals." So they divided them the territory. So they divided between them the territory to be visited. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. That's through 6.
18 goes on to say, Eliyahu met Obadiah, the person in charge of the palace, while Obadiah was looking for grass to feed the king's animals. Now verse 7.
Obadiah was on the road when suddenly Elijah encountered him. Obadiah recognized him, fell on his face, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?"
I gotta have some fun here. Obadiah says to Eliyahu, or sees Eliyahu or Elijah, and asks, "Is it really you? Holy smokes, it's the prophet Elijah." That's not what he really said.
That's
probably how he felt. Then verse 8.
Verse 8?
Yes.
He answered, "Yes, it is I. Go tell your master, Elijah is here."
Uh-oh. Verse 8. "Yes, it is I. Go tell your master, Eliyahu is here." Then in verse 9, Obadiah acts like the woman did. Read 9.
Obadiah replied, "How have I sinned that you would hand your servant over to Ahab to kill me?"
See, he started thinking by himself instead of believing that he was led by God. How have I sinned? Eliyahu, now you want me to go to Ahab and he'll kill me. Then Obadiah explains what Ahab has done over the last few years concerning finding Eliyahu, and how great a thing he, Obadiah, has done. With the 100 prophets being hid in 2 caves. Can you imagine that? Obadiah was a prophet, Israel prophet, and he took 100 of the Israel prophets that believed in God, who wasn't following Baal, and he hid them in 2 caves. Now he was in charge of the food for the palace, so he was taking the food and making sure those 2 caves were supplied with food. That had to be a lot of food that he secretly got out to those 2 caves. I was going to say,
a lot of risk for him.
Verse 14, I didn't say read it, but I guess you better.
Verse 14?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you say, go tell my master, look, Elijah is here. Why, he'll kill me.
I wrote, he will kill me. Here he goes again. Then in verse 15, Eliyahu says, as Adonai Tazarot lives, in other words, as the Lord God of heaven lives, before whom I stand, I will meet with Ahab today. I think she was supposed to read 15 before I did that.
No, that's fine. That's just exactly what it says.
That's exactly what 15 says.
That's exactly what it says.
Now read 16 through 21.
So Obadiah went, found Ahab, and told him. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, is it really you, you troubler of Israel? He answered, I haven't troubled Israel. You have, you and your father's house, by abandoning Adonai's mitzvah and following the Baal. Now order all Israel to assemble before me in Mount Carmel, along with 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of the Asher who ate at Jezebel's table. Ahab sent word to all the people of Israel and assembled the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Elijah stepped forward before all the people and said, how long are you going to jump back and forth between 2 positions? If Adonai is God, follow him. But if it's Baal, follow him. The people answered him not a word.
By studying those verses, you come away with Israel back then, you might say, was a lot like what we live now in the United States. In the belief part. What we would say is, Yeshua is the Lord God. Follow him. If all those other names are your Lord, follow them. We can't do anything to make you follow Yeshua. That's up to you. That's your business, not mine or hers or my brother George over there, who's sitting across from me. But Elijah, had a special calling for a real touch of Adonai, by a real touch from Adonai himself. Well, he just went through miracle after miracle, being fed by birds, with little pieces of bread and meat, twice a day, morning and evening, a widow's flour and oil not running out because she fed him first, because that's what he said. Raised a boy from the dead, even though it took laying on him 3 times. Those were because he knew if Adonai is God, follow him. How did the Israelite people respond? Her last 3 words were, they didn't say a word. Then comes the part we have heard a few preachers hit lightly. Baal's prophets numbering 450, and Jezebel has 400 of her own prophets who eat at her table, it states. Eliyahu says, bring them all. Verse 23.
Let them give us 2 young bulls, and they can choose the bull they want for themselves. Then let them cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood, but put no fire under it. I will prepare the other bull, lay it on the wood, and put no fire under it.
Take 2 young bulls. You take the one you want, and I'll take the one that's left. You cut your pieces up, I'll cut mine up. Set the pieces, you set you on your wood, I'll set the one I cut up on my wood. But don't set a fire. Don't put a fire under it. I like how the people answered Adonai. I like how the people answered Eliyahu in verse 24.
Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of Adonai, and the God who answers with fire, let him be God. All the people answered, good idea. Agreed.
I started out this, good idea. We agree with that. Because then we will know how strong Baal is, what they're really thinking. They were brainwashed in what Baal could do, a lot like the imitation and the imitational name today. These few verses were truly amazingly interesting in themselves. Picture this. I have to smile when I say that. Picture this, verses 26 through 28.
I know where it's going to after laughter. 26 through 28. They took the bull that was given them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. Baal, answer us! But no voice was heard, and no one answered as they jumped around on the altar they had made. Around noon, Elijah began ridiculing them. Shout louder! After all, he is God, isn't he? Maybe he's daydreaming. Or he's on the potty. Or he's away on a trip. Maybe he's asleep and you have to wake him up. Through 28, right?
Yeah.
So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and knives, as their custom was, until blood gushed out all over them.
I actually started laughing when I started.
What it says.
When I really started studying that, I thought, that is really comical. Shout louder! Maybe he's daydreaming. Your God's daydreaming. You gotta get it back over here. Or, I couldn't find it in the English, but in this one it says, or maybe he's on the potty. How about he's away on a trip? I got it. Maybe he's asleep and you have to wake him up. So they shouted louder and cut themselves. Like that would make Baal notice. It seemed to us, Eliyahu was having a lot of fun at their expense. Verse 29. Verse 20.
Tom says, is this the first recorded trash talking? First one that you found.
Verse 29.
By now it was afternoon, and they went on ranting and raving until it was time for the evening offering. But no voice came, no one answered, no one paid any attention.
Now that's an interesting reading. The ranting and raving kept up most of the day. Then it was time for the evening offering. Here is the interesting part about the chosen people. The ones Adonai handpicked. During this evening offering time, no one came to worship. no one worshipped at all. No Israelite, not one paid any attention to the evening offering that was their calling in the first place. Not one showed that respect to Adonai. About like worshiping Baal or a made-up Messiah and not worshiping, paying no attention, showing no respect to the true name of his son Yeshua today. That will also be made clear by going through the fire for purification or for your total destruction on earth. To go to the lake of fire and sulfur, like we said, I think it was last week.
That week before, yeah, one of them.
The second
Just
death.
recently. Mm-hmm.
See, everybody's foundation will go through the fire on Judgment Day. Adonai's fire will reveal and refine what is worthy to remain in his kingdom and destroy what is not. What happens next? Verse 30.
Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." All the people came up to him as he set about repairing the altar of Adonai that had been broken down.
He had to repair the altar of Adonai because of all the ranting and raving. The good people of that false god must have damaged the altar trying to wake up or at least get his attention. They damaged the altar that Eliyahu made to Adonai. Verse 34 and 35.
Verse 3. Oh. Then he said, "Fill 4 pots with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." They did it. "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he said, and they did it a 3rd time. By now the water was flowing around the altar and it filled the trench.
All right, he rebuilt the altar because they damaged it with all their dancing, ranting, raving, kicking, screaming, whatever they were doing. So he rebuilt that altar. Then he even dug a trench around that altar and told him, pour 4 pots of water on everything. Pour 4 pots of water on everything because it's an altar to Adonai. Then he says, do it again. They did it. And what's his comment? How about a 3rd time? So they did it a 3rd time. And the people were going, you imagine they're going, this guy's goofy. I mean, we couldn't get Baal to send down fire, and he wants us to water down everything. Well, how's he going to get a fire started? Verse 36. And 37, excuse me.
Then when it came time for offering the evening offering, Elijah the prophet approached and said, "Adonai, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God of Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, Adonai, hear me, so that this people may know that you, Adonai, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back to you."
Did you notice that first little bit that she read? She said, it was time for the evening sacrifice to Adonai is when this starts to take place. Verse 36 and 37. Adonai, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let the people see for themselves that you are the God of Israel. Through this, they will turn their hearts back to you, Adonai. None of those people during the evening sacrifice, were coming up to the altar and worshiping Adonai. My comment, what a fire. It gives us a glimpse of what to expect. Verse 38 and 39.
Then the fire of Adonai fell. It consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water in the trench. When all of the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, Adonai is God. Adonai is God.
No, when I first read that, when I first read it, I thought, oh, they finally saw the light.
Powerful statement.
They saw what they had to come back. And then here's what I wrote just the other day. It seemed the people saw what happened. And they became scared of what they'd been doing. They fell on their faces and said, Adonai is God. Adonai is God. They were trying to make Adonai accept them because they had been walking away from him for so long, serving Baal. They became scared. They saw what Adonai can do. And they weren't following him. It didn't take a ton of bricks to fall on them to get to the truth. No, it took the same kind of refining fire that is awaiting every human in history. Just like on Judgment Day, Adonai's fire will reveal and refine what is worthy to remain in his kingdom and destroy what is not. Every human in history will see that. To find out what is worthy to remain in his kingdom and destroy what and who is not.
Tom said, fear is a powerful motivator.
Okay. You're going to do something we've never done before. We've been talking for about an hour. That's part 1. Part 2 comes next week. We're going to keep going about Eliyahu. And I don't even have it started yet. Well, I do have it started. Isn't that
Wow.
that was...
Wow.
I've never seen most of that before. You know, heard about the ravens and raising the boy from the dead and his successor, Elijah does pretty much the same thing, but
Wow.
hope you enjoyed it. And I don't know what is causing this to, in the middle of everything. George had an idea when it was all offline. His Facebook has thrown him offline a couple times about when he speaks religious stuff. And if that's what they're doing, Adonai will not like it.
Thank you guys for your patience.
Remember?
And for coming back and joining us.
Yes, there's been quite a few that came
Yes.
back.
Yep.
And I hope you got something out of this. I hope you understood where we were trying to go or where God wanted you to go. Hope it opened up your eyes to some stuff.
And
Understand that you have to study the scriptures yourself. Don't just believe what we say. Don't believe what your preacher says. Study it. Don't just read it. Study it. If you don't, you're no better than the ones who are worshiping Baal, as far as I'm concerned.
And remember, part 2 next week.
That's right.
More
My boss
Elijah.
said, remember, part 2 next week.
Part 2 next week. Thank you,
You can leave
guys.
those pieces of paper there. We'll pick them up.
Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thank you for
Have an
everybody that
awesome
came
week,
back.
you guys.
Everybody was on. Somebody said something.
Robin just.
Oh, she just came on.
Hey, Robin.
Your daily
mom's
dollar
in the
short.
hospital. So,
But God bless.
have an
have a
awesome
great
week,
week.
guys. We will see you next
We
Tuesday.
will be flying Friday and coming back Sunday, so we will be here next Tuesday.
Yep.
And if I don't have part 2 done, I'll have something else and throw that in the middle. That'll really throw you off. But anyway,
Have an
Love
awesome
you.
week, guys.
have a great week.
See you next Tuesday.